and go on to agenda item number 2, or I'm going to actually do introductions. I'm sorry, do introductions first. I'm going to go ahead and read off the names of the folks who are logged on the Zoom meeting. From my screen, I'm going to start with Charles Stack, Alexandra Chavez, Lee Comrie, Fatima Luna, Carlos De La Torre, Dustin Fitzpatrick, Mead Meyer Wellborn, Hannah Oden, Crystal Spires, Jeff Hildebrand, Don Garcia, Brianne Bushman, Melanie Alvarez, Alexa Scholl, Catherine Rydell, Melanie Sims, Mark Novak, and Michael Contanzaro. Sorry if I butchered anyone's name there. So I'll go ahead and go on to agenda item number 2, the in-kind form. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let them know now. Time is spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. And we're going to go on to agenda item number 3, approval of the April 14, 2023 EPAC meeting summary. Did everyone have a chance to review the meeting summary? Anybody have any comments or amendments? Before we go to a vote on this, I would like to request an addition of this on the future agenda items. Last month, I did request an air quality subcommittee meeting to be held, and that is not reflected on the minutes in the future agenda items. So I would like to request that request be put on to number 9, future agenda items in the meeting summary before we approve. Any discussion on that? Okay, can I have a vote to, anybody wanted to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Great. And a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please unmute and say aye, or yeah, go ahead.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right. Then the meeting summary will be approved as amended. We'll go on to agenda item number 4, the solid waste reduction planning update. And today we're going to have Carlos De La Torre as the director of the City of Tucson's Environmental and General Services Department. The department provides collection and disposal services for more than 140,000 residential customers and provides fleet maintenance services and facilities management. Prior to taking this position, Carlos was the city manager for Douglas, Arizona. He's a professional civil engineer and has been dedicated to public service since his first internship in 1995 at the City of Tucson's Los Reales landfill. And he's going to give us an update on the solid waste reduction planning. Go ahead and take it away, Carlos.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to present today. The City Council, as you well know, adopted a climate action resolution that called out for specific climate goals initiatives. One of them that is directly related to our department is essentially, there's 3 of them. One is really carbon neutrality by 2030, 50% waste reduction by 2030, and 0 waste by 2050. So with that directive, we move forward with the development of what we call the zero waste roadmap. This roadmap was recently adopted by Mayor and Council basically last week, May 23rd. That plan is really just outlines at a very high level some short, medium, and long-term goals really to achieve those goals, those zero waste goals. So there's the immediate focus on that of the plan is really for us to focus on really developing a residential commercial organics recycling program. So we're in the infancy stages of really developing really what that may look like for the community. So there's various things that could be considered, but I think initially we're probably looking at drop-off locations for both food waste and green waste. The other thing that we're probably looking at that is we have a very good recycling program, but I think unfortunately we continue to be challenges like many communities with the level of contamination that essentially that we see on the program. What we are experiencing is roughly a 30% contamination. What we see pretty much the best programs are around 10-50% contamination. So we're obviously have a lot of work to do. So our goal is really how do we make sure that the recycling program, it is really a good recycling program, and for the folks that really want to be part of that, really to be part of that program, and the folks that may not want to be participate on that, maybe we need to provide them alternatives on how they need to dispose of their solid waste. So on that is we're going to infuse a lot of education, but coupled with that, it's probably going to be most likely enter into an enforcement program, very strict enforcement program, and also really providing the public and the residents alternative modes of how they can dispose of their materials. At the end of the day, it really is a how do we look at it from a policy perspective? Because whether you're recycling, you have a 95-gallon bin, or you have a refuse bin, those are basically, that's considered waste no matter what. So if we try to achieve really a zero waste goal or mentality, is can we reduce that to one single bin? Okay, and then if that one single bin is basically afforded, as you have the option to expand your services, to either a recycling bin, or B, another trash container, and then we take that approach on a pay as you go or pay as you throw. So those are all the things that we need to consider moving forward. So everything is on the table on that. So again, we're barely looking at all the various options in terms of not only the delivery of the services, what the cost implications are, and really what are some of the unintended consequences of whatever we may do that we would need to address in the future. The other program, again, the immediate focus would be is the brush and bulky collection program. Throughout the city, we essentially provide brush and bulky collection twice a year to every resident, to every residential property, and essentially staggered either kind of the first half of the city is done, and then the second half is done in the other part of the year. So you essentially get 2 pickups a year, and the goal is really, can we separate essentially the brush from the bulky? Is there really an opportunity for us to really segregate the green waste and really be able to divert essentially that material so that we can turn it into a composting material? So can we basically find another way of those bulky materials, find some other diversion program instead of really going directly into the landfill, trying to break those into metals, turn them into break the furniture. So how can we segregate essentially that waste as we pick it up in order really for us to enhance our diversion program? The plan also calls for some medium-term improvements. So we certainly, as we expand our organics programs, collections program, we need to expand the composting operations at the landfill. We also want to really deploy machinery and equipment really to start doing some demolition waste processing at the Los Reales landfill. And then ultimately, probably within 5 to 7 years, be in a position to consider building a mixed waste processing facility at Los Reales. So those are some of the things that are on the books. Looking at all the feasibilities, looking at all the plans required really to move that forward, not only from an operating plan that it's coupled with the permitting, but also the financial plan that needs to be associated with those initiatives. And the other program that we're essentially not really just focusing on really just creating major recycling programs throughout the community, but really identified some areas where it provides opportunities for the city to start doing a lot of boutique recycling. And in the case, and what I'm referring to boutique recycling is very specific on really creating programs that really bring value not only to the community, but really find opportunities to develop the circularity within the community as well. So the Biofusion product or initiative that you probably heard about is really one of those programs, and it's really it's a non-traditional recycling program where essentially what we're trying to collect is really plastics that are not recyclable under our current program. That essentially that we see a lot of litter, we see a lot of those plastics not being put to a good use. And so the idea is, or the principle in that is, let's really deploy essentially a collection system where residents can go drop off their plastic, the non-recyclable plastics. We essentially right now at a point in time we're taking that to a facility, the Speedway landfill, which is being essentially baled. And then that material is eventually shipped to California so it can be made into blocks. What the agreement that the city just entered into is really to facilitate the relocation or the setup of a Biofusion operation here in Tucson, where again we would continue to provide essentially the collection. We would do the hauling, bring essentially the plastics to the Los Real Sustainability Campus, where essentially Biofusion would set up operations at that location, and then Biofusion will essentially would help us and facilitate essentially the recycling of the non-recyclable plastics, and then obviously try to develop the market and essentially the products in the region. So again, it's very, very fluid. I think it's really something that has a lot of value, has a lot of merit. And just continue to do our best really to get it moving and get it forward, get it going as quickly as we can. The other area that we're putting a lot of focus is the Los Real Sustainability Campus. We want to make sure that essentially that campus really becomes to be the catalyst that really showcases a lot of the initiatives and programs of the outlined in the declaration of climate emergency for the city of Tucson. We want to make sure that is a place where we can deploy the infrastructure, the cutting edge solid waste infrastructure, so that we can achieve the zero waste goals. And we want to make sure that also that facility is seen as a community open space asset today and not in the future. So let's try to essentially enhance essentially that campus and begin to use it as a complementary open space for that area. And ultimately is we want to make sure that we begin to transition ourselves on how we view waste from really just being a liability really to a resource. And also we have to maximize the use of our assets. So we have over 1,100 acres at that facility, and we just want to make sure that we maximize the use of that facility. And really our incentive is really to make sure that if we identify that site as really as our solid waste processing center, that we don't need to find another facility for at least another 100 years. So that's really our goal, is how can we really just focus our efforts in that facility, extend the life and the use of that facility, but really how do we provide all the services related to waste management at one single facility that would serve essentially this region for many generations to come. So one of the things we're going really to make that happen is we're going through some plan revisions. So our plan area development is in the process of being revised. We are really delineating a lot of that open space or the buffer around the landfill, especially. So if you look at the image, is everything to the right of the image that you see that area in green. And so that's really the area that we're creating the buffer, the landscaping buffer. We're seeing a lot of development basically approaching the landfill. And we just want to make sure that we continue to be good neighbors, but we just want to make sure that we provide ample, I would say, space between us and the adjacent neighborhoods. And the plan is really, again, on that is create some trails, create some active or passive recreational areas that essentially in that area are non-existent at this point in time. But really, how do they serve well for those communities, but also how do they serve us well in terms of really providing the buffer, so that way when we're still operating that facility in the next 70, 80 years, that when folks are essentially in their backyards, the intent is really for them not to be just looking at a mound of waste being essentially created, but really essentially trees and maybe a trail that they can really provide them as a buffer between us and the facility. So we are planning on expanding our waste cells further to the east and further to the south, and that's really part of the plan area development amendments, and also creating some space within the campus itself, really to allow for other companies or the private sector to come in and set up operations in line really with the waste processing goals, so they can essentially set up operations close to that facility. So here's really just an overview in terms of really what the first phase may look like, or what the focus is today. It's really, again, creating a pedestrian pathway or multi-use pathway on the northern part of the landfill. So it goes essentially along Los Reales Road, then turns further to the east and ties into the new development that is under construction at this point in time. From essentially, again, along Los Reales Road, from essentially Swan all the way to just, I would say, a little bit east of Craycroft. You see the areas in green that those are essentially being delineated as passive or active recreational areas. On the north side of that, the areas in purple, you see the development of proposed development of some commercial lots. And those lots really are intended really to allow companies to come in and set up operations, such as Bifusion, set up operations at those facilities. So the idea is, let's create some shovel-ready pads where folks can come in and set up build their own site improvements, so they can operate out of those commercial lots. And then the area in light blue, that's essentially the proposed area for the future mixed waste processing facility. So the focus right now, again, is really moving forward with the pedestrian pathway, really moving forward with really the deployment of the landscaping buffer, really moving forward with the development of those commercial lots, and really leaving the space at this point in time, the green area, just I would say virgin, until essentially there's enough interest really from either Parks and Recreation or to start really looking at doing some improvements in that area. If there's no movement on that, then our goal is still going to create a landscaping buffer along that northern boundary. And here just a closer look in terms of what those potential commercial lots could look like, what will look like. And then on the lower part, you'll see the proposed location of the mixed waste processing facility. This is really just a very high level concept in terms of what those possible recreation areas could look like. Again, those are active areas, active recreation areas. Again, we're just making we're carving that space, and obviously the time will tell in terms of what facilities may be built at those facilities, if any are even built. But again, it's still want to make sure that we created that buffer around the facility as well. With that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Does anybody have any questions for Carlos? Alexandra?
Hi, good morning. Carlos, thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting to see what the plans are for the Los Reales area. I had a question regarding the bifusion process and the hauling of the plastics. And would that be hauled to California via trucks, or would would the process include freight?
So the way it's set up today is the raw material, the bale plastics goes into bales via truck to California for right now, because that's the only facility that's the closest facility they have to us. So that's what we've been doing. And yeah, for the foreseeable future until the facility is up and running here in Tucson, that's the way we'll continue to operate in that fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles?
Okay. Carlos, thank you very much for sharing that information. I relocated here from Chicago, and I have done a great deal of work in solid waste management in the Chicago area and other states. Would it be possible to get a tour of your facility? I'm working right now with Trace Rios, so I'd like to get a feeling of your operations.
Certainly, absolutely. If yes.
Maybe we could do it as a group.
Yeah, we could do it as a group. Yeah, absolutely.
Great idea. I have a question, Carlos, about the recreational facilities.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of wondering if there's been any environmental justice considerations regarding that. And the reason I ask that is because the city of Tucson does hold a class 1 permit with PDEQ for air quality, which means it's a pretty significant emitter of air pollution, including methane and other, criteria pollutants like sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide and things like that. So it does concern me a little bit that the city is considering that area for recreation, being that would just bring more people closer to those emissions and then maybe breathing heavier if they're recreating. Is that something that's been considered by the city, or have you done any sort of localized air pollution monitoring to see what people might be exposed to?
No, Natalie, not at this point in time. So all those are just conceptuals. Obviously, we need to go through all the environmental justice. We got to go through all the studies. We got to go through all this stuff. Parks will essentially take the lead on that. We just from a facility perspective, we're saying, hey, we're carving that space, whether it's active recreational area or passive recreational area or just open space. We just want to create that buffer. We offer that as a way to possibly deploy those facilities, but obviously we're barely in the infancy stages in terms of really making that happen. The reason why it makes some sense to that on the other side is obviously we don't want to create additional problems or really especially from a health perspective. But the other thing that we're seeing is that there are no recreational facilities and within essentially those neighborhoods, and you have a lot of neighborhoods that essentially are adjacent to the facility. That our goal is really just how can we provide them some recreational facilities where there are non-existent today, and then how do we improve by the deployment of additional tree canopies, how can we improve essentially the air quality in the area. So yeah, it's still very I would say in the infancy stages or that being developed, being looked at, and make sure that whether it makes sense or may not make sense really to deploy that out there. So but yeah, thank you for your consideration, your thoughts.
Thanks. Anybody else have any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much for that update, Carlos. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. We're going to go on to agenda item number 5 now. Thank you very much, Carlos, for your presentation. Agenda item number 5 is the regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and the air quality manager at PAG, Dustin Fitzpatrick, will give us an update on where that's at this point. Go ahead, Dustin.
All right, great. Thanks, Natalie. Crystal, will you advance the slides or are you handing it over? Oh, I have control. Okay. All right, thanks everybody. Again, I'm Dustin Fitzpatrick, Air Quality Manager. Going to give an update on the progress so far for the regional greenhouse gas inventory report. So first off, covering the energy and emissions data, the current report will cover calendar years 2016 through 2021. And I wanted to give a big thank you to anyone on the call that helped out in that data collection process. Mainly it was collecting new energy data for 20 and 21 because the previous report covered 2014 to 19, which we already collected that data for the 2016 to 19 period. And that some of that data was updated, the 2016 to 19 data, just per input from the energy contacts. One of the examples was with the Southwest Gas, providing additional detail and clarification of the split between commercial and industrial end users, and that resulted in a proportional shift towards the commercial use over industrial. So the emission calculations, also we used the ICLEI ClearPath model, and previously it was the 4th assessment for IPCC, now recommended as the 5th assessment. So that had just minor changes. You can see the methane global warming potential went up to 28 from 25, and nitrous oxide went down to 265 from 298. And that's just based on the latest developments and the understanding of climate science modeling and measurements. And they had little impact on those past results simply because the majority of emissions are CO2. So the on-road, non-road, and aviation gasoline transportation emissions were previously calculated using our MOVES model, motor vehicle emissions simulator. We use that in-house for transportation conformity modeling of emissions from the tailpipe of the NAAQS criteria pollutants, and that's been changed to a fuel consumption-based calculation and using the Highway User Revenue Fund, the HERF data. So that approach follows the method used in the Federal Highway Association's proposed greenhouse gas emissions performance measure, which calls for using the each state's individual reported fuel sales data. And so we can use the HERF data and see how much fuel is sold in Pima County. And that method's sufficiently accurate for our region, just considering that our urbanized areas have negligible overlap with neighboring counties. If we were in another area of the country where there was a lot of crossover, it might not be a reliable method. And so we also switched over to that approach, the fuel consumption approach for the Pima County and City of Tucson governments, because they track their fuel use for their fleets. And so previously we were gathering the total annual miles driven and estimating a fuel consumption factor for the vehicle types. So that was the big change in the report for the transportation emissions, switching from that modeled to just a direct measurement of fuel consumed, because you're going to have an absolute amount of CO2 emitted for every gallon of fuel consumed. So we'll start with Eastern Pima County here for the preliminary findings. So that table is showing the calculated emissions from 2016 to 2021. For the overall county community, that's the broadest umbrella of the inventory. There was an overall 15% decrease from around 14.4 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents in 2016 down to 12.1 million in 2021. So that overall decrease is attributable mainly, if you look at the red symbolizing stationary energy, there's a 30% decrease in emissions from less carbon intensive grid supplied electricity. So that stationary energy sector includes residential, commercial, and industrial energy use from natural gas and electricity. And the transportation sector includes on-road and non-road vehicles, aircraft, and locomotive emissions. So in terms of looking for a pandemic effect on emissions, you can see that the fuel use for transportation emissions contracted slightly there in 2020. That was due to gasoline sales decreasing about 13% over 2019, while diesel actually went up slightly in 2020 and then even more so in 2021. And that might be from an increase in delivery truck travel. And so overall, during that 6-year period that this report covers, to give you an idea, gasoline sales in Pima County average about 400 million gallons per year, and diesel's around 60 million gallons. So compared to the last report, transportation rose to 43% of total emissions. That pie chart is for 2021 specifically on the right there. And that's up from 35% in the 2019 report. So, however, I'll note that that might not be an accurate reflection because this report calculated 4.4 million metric tons in 2019, and using the that was using the MOVES model. Using the fuel use data, it was 5.3 million in 2019. So that was a 19% increase from switching from the MOVES model to using the HERF fuel cells data. There's a combination too of the reporting that we get from ADOT for motor vehicle registrations kind of being inconsistent and now being more accurate because we get each of the VINs, whereas before we got just an overall picture. So also for CAP water there you see at 2%. There was a 73% increase in water because previously we were just accounting for the City of Tucson CAP use. This go around, we collected and put in all the water users, the agricultural and the other water districts. However, there was a 50% decrease in CO2 emissions just because they changed from the coal-fired power plant at the Navajo Generating Station, which closed at the end of 2019. So CAP's 2% in 2021 versus it was 3% in 2019. And you see cement production there. That's notable too. That's just the Cal Portland cement plant over in Rito, and that's responsible for 77% of the emissions in 2021, which was the same pretty much year over year. And then there's a new category for energy transport that got put in just because it's the conveyance of natural gas with a compressor station. That's pretty negligible for the contributions. So moving on, this is the City of Tucson community. So this is the emissions coming from within the City of Tucson limits versus the entire county. So you can see it's about half the population, half the emissions. Similar trends with a larger proportion of emissions due to stationary energy because we don't include the industrial processes with the cement because that's in the county area. So the overall emissions decreased 27%, down from 7.2 million in 2016 to 5.2 in 2021. And again, a 37% reduction in stationary energy emissions, and that's the result of a greener electricity grid. This next slide here, this is moving into the government inventories for the government operations. This is for Pima County. There's really not much of a net difference between 2016 compared to 2021 with 126,000 metric tons for each of those years. Notable though is that the waste emissions for 2021 are higher than the past at that 22%. And specifically that was due to wastewater treatment emissions reported from the Green Valley Lagoon system in 2020 and 2021 being much higher than in the past years. All right, this is the City of Tucson government. Similarly, 25% overall reduction in emissions between 2016 and 2021, more reflective of the larger stationary energy use. Went from 216,000 metric tons in 2016 down to 161. With that higher percent of stationary energy due mainly to energy use by Tucson Water. All right, so that's it. Kind of some of the preliminary findings I wanted to share. Moving forward with the next steps, I'm looking to receive any additional information on the greenhouse gas reduction efforts from the jurisdictional members that I can include in the narrative of the report. So any grants that you've received from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or Inflation Reduction Act, there's specifically a program for energy efficiency and conservation block grants that has formula allocations that were allotted to City of Tucson, Pima County, Marana, Oro Valley, Tohono O'odham, and Pasquiyaki. If you have plans to use those grant funds to reduce emissions, we could highlight those actions in the report. I know the City of Tucson has their climate action plan. Carlos, you just mentioned the zero waste plan passed, and the county last month passed the resolution to develop a climate action plan. So I'd appreciate if your contacts can convey me any specific measures that you're looking to include in the narrative of our report as we move forward with the draft. Then in August, we'll distribute that after internally we've finalized a draft. We'll distribute that out to EPAC and then plan to hold an air quality subcommittee meeting in September for a technical review of the report. Then we'll make the final edits based on the feedback received from EPAC and AQS members, with the finalized report looking to go back to this committee at either probably the October meeting, and if not that, the December meeting.
All right.
And that's it for my updates. There's my email address listed there for you to send information, and so we can evaluate and consider that for inclusion in the draft report.
Thanks, Dustin. It looks like Kimberly has a question.
Hi, Dustin. So I have a question and also a few comments. I'd like clarification on your comment about emissions from the Green Valley Water Reclamation Facility. And I'd also like to point out, we're doing our emission inventory for treatment and operations. And unfortunately, the ICLEI protocol doesn't allow for us to take credit for or reduce emissions given the biogas plant. I'm thinking you may be familiar with it. But anyways, if not us, wouldn't Southwest Gas, whose emissions you're incorporating into all this, be able to take credit for that?
Yeah, thanks for the questions, Kimberly. On the Green Valley, that was the BOD numbers, the biological oxygen demand reported for that facility in Green Valley, going from a couple hundred up to 4,000 and 7,000 per day. So that resulted in quite an increase. So if you want to confirm that information that was provided, we can just double check on that. As far as the renewable biogas that's happening at Tres Rios, so this report covers through 2021. I believe that went online
Fall of 21.
fall of 21. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily
They're
receive-
biogenic emissions. So yeah, we can't take credit for them. But, you know, Southwest Gas is, they should be able to.
Yeah, and you know they're not going to be discounted from yours because instead of being flared, they're being piped into Southwest Gas to be renewed. And for the next go around, yeah, I would look to deduct those emissions from Southwest Gas use. But I'm imagining they're going to be perhaps in the 0.01% type of thing.
Okay.
Compared to their overall system use. So
Okay.
I will look in the next report to deduct that out. But yeah, in terms of getting a credit for it, it's still, yeah, it's being generated. So it would be likely probably shifted into Southwest Gas.
Okay.
Since you're not flaring it.
Who did you communicate with about the BOD numbers for Green Valley, just so that I can loop them in and see what was provided?
It was Hussein Al-Jurdi.
Okay. Thank you.
He
Yeah.
provided them.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Michael, you have a question?
Just a comment, really. I wanted to thank Dustin for the work on this. I think that the report has gotten really tightened up. I appreciate the switch in terms of the transportation model. And some of the other things you've done over the last couple years to tighten up the sort of boundaries and timeframes. So it's just really a compliment to you, Dustin, for your effort, because I think the results of this are a lot more accurate for the region. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Michael. Thanks for your help supplying all the data. I know it's a big lift, and that transportation approach was, inspired by FHWA's proposed performance measure, and it just, made the connection. We already have HERF data. We track every gallon sold, and what's nice is that also moves over into the non-road, which is construction equipment, and they use red dye diesel. If anyone's familiar with that, it's dyed red. It's not taxed, and so they have to track how much fuel they're not taxing, and so that goes toward a more accurate non-road data, whereas before it was an estimation from that EPA model. And then surprisingly, they also track aviation gasoline, which isn't a huge contribution, and for the natural gas for the buses and whatnot, that was an element that kind of resulted in that shift to commercial from industrial, because Southwest Gas tracks those the CNG used for transportation. So that was kind of nice to pull that all over instead of the guesstimating off the miles driven.
And did you subtract the city CNG from that? Because I would imagine that would be duplicative.
Yeah, I believe I did.
Okay.
But when the report goes out for review, we can double check.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your work. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Kimberly, did you have something else?
I do, thanks. I'm wondering if you do any projections with these models, and if you do, what the picture looks like as far as, the continued greening of the grid. I was reading a report from TEP that they anticipate that by 2035, they'll be producing 80% or 70% of electricity, and it will result in an 80% reduction in emissions.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kimberly. We, the purpose of this is just an inventory. On the projection and reduction side, it's more for the jurisdictional partners, with the climate plans that are being developed. It might be challenging to forecast the future. However, you can see the trend. Obviously, the reductions we're seeing out of that red area are with stationary energy, and it's not from natural gas, it's from the electric grid. And so transportation emissions are going to shift higher proportionately. And so likewise, the electrification of transportation will have the same effect, as it will continue to get cleaner as well, with the more alternative energy being added into the grid.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Dustin? Great. We really appreciate all your work on this, Dustin. This information is really important for our region and for planning purposes. So it's great that you are able to take it on and have more confidence in the data this time. I do think it kind of reflects that the larger transportation number reflects that we do have some work to do there. And fortunately, the region is getting the carbon reduction funds for that. So looking forward to seeing how we can kind of reduce those emissions using those funds that are coming in. So that'll be something we can discuss at the Air Quality Subcommittee in September. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thanks, Natalie.
All right, so we're going to go on to agenda item number 6, jurisdictional resiliency planning update. And we have several different people from different jurisdictions who are going to be providing updates on this. We are going to start with Pima County, and Kat Davis works with the health department and serves as the division manager for public health emergency preparedness. So we're going to let Kat take it away first. Go ahead, Kat.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So as Natalie mentioned, my name is Kat Davis. I am the division manager for emergency preparedness. Under our division, we are also building out a climate health program, as well as a border health program. So doing a few different things, but you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Or do I have control? I'm not sure.
Yes, you have control.
Oh, I do. Okay, great. All right. So one of the things we've been working on is the cooling centers. So we've partnered with the city of Tucson, as well as other Pima County departments to help identify locations for cooling centers. So we have 2 Pima County locations through community workforce development, and then for the summer. And then we have 5 heat respite locations through shelter providers. So that was all coordinated through the city of Tucson and their continuum of care. So for people experiencing homelessness, they have 5 heat respite locations. They also have 6 additional cooling center locations through the city of Tucson at the different ward offices. And then Pima County libraries are serving as hydration stations. So there has been a bit of a change in language around what these different locations mean. Cooling centers are really open to anyone. They can come in and get some air conditioning and hang out for a little bit if they need to cool down. Whereas heat respite is more designed for people experiencing homelessness. They might be able to nap. They might have wraparound services available. Generally, pets are also welcome. People can bring their belongings with them. So if they have a shopping cart or something, those would also be available or be welcome in a heat respite location. And then the hydration stations are more focused on providing water and water bottles and things of that nature. So we have created a GIS map that we're working to update now with these locations. It also has some splash pads and also water fountains. So I don't see a way to get to the chat at this moment. Sorry, usually we use Teams, so I'm not the best with Zoom. But the Climate Health Network page website that we're developing that will have all of this information on it is pima.gov/climate health network. And so on that webpage, we have this GIS map, as well as some other training and resources available. So as I mentioned, we were working on some training. So we've created a heat-related illness training for cooling center staff. So this is currently available through the City of Tucson's LMS network or LMS system. So they can push it out to all the shelter providers, and it just shows some things to look for, how to respond to heat-related illness, and other issues that it could be, such as psychiatric medications, or sometimes people with diabetes can all have be more highly affected by heat. And so the training just kind of goes through what to look for, the signs and symptoms, and appropriate responses. So that will also be on that pima.gov/climate health network website as well. We're just working on getting it uploaded right now. So we're also using some funds to purchase items to stock at the cooling center. So last year we supplied a bunch of water bottles, bottled water, but we don't want to use climate grant funds to purchase a bunch of single-use plastic. So we are this year switching to refillable water bottles. So those will be going to the cooling center locations, the libraries, as well as little packets of sunscreen for those locations as well. So those will just be available to be given out to folks. We're also working on some evaluations. So we have part of a BRACE grant. It's a pretty small grant for us, but University of Arizona also has a BRACE grant, as well as Maricopa County. So we're working with them, as well as AZDHS. So with this, one of the things that we're trying to do with this funding is to use the data to evaluate location and accessibility of the cooling centers. So the U of A has done some really incredible work figuring out walkability, how far people can walk on our hot summer days without raising their body temperature to an unsafe level, and what areas are then walkable to cooling centers, as well as availability from public transit. So how many sites are accessible on public transit without having to do multiple transfers between different lines. So they've done some great mapping on that. And that also helps us identify areas that might be underserved. So we know that the areas between I-10 and I-19 are highly socially vulnerable, but also lack a lot of services such as cooling centers. So working with city and county to help identify ways to address those needs. So the next steps for us, at least here at the health department, we did receive a large CDC infrastructure grant, and with that infrastructure grant, we'll be hiring a climate health manager. Right now, the program has just kind of been floated around by several different programs. And so this will give all of our health and climate work a home. So before the end of the year, we'll be hiring a climate health manager. And then also we're beginning work on our climate health strategic plan. This will also be on the website, the Climate Health Network website. First, what we're doing is reviewing other climate plans. The city of Tucson just released theirs not long ago. CDC, EPA, AZDHS, they all have plans. So we're kind of reviewing them to figure out how to align our climate health strategic plans with their pre-existing strategic plans for the region as well as nationally. And then we'll identify our climate goals, and those will probably be the first thing that we post to the website, will be sort of our goals. And then from there, we'll build out action steps. So that is kind of the next big thing that we have planned at the moment. So that is all from me. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has questions.
Thanks, Kat. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next person, who is myself, actually. I am with the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality. I'm a senior program manager for outreach and education. And I am going to update you all on some very recent news, the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So EPA has, through the Inflation Reduction Act, released opportunities for all of the states to receive $3 million, and the 63 largest MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas in the United States, so the largest metro areas, will be receiving $1 million in non-competitive planning grants, and totaling $250 million for those entities. Shortly thereafter, we haven't been given an exact time frame, but we are being told within months, possibly the spring, it will be followed by $4.6 billion of grants for implementation work. And these grants will be competitive. And EPA does have a requirement that in order to be eligible to receive the funds for the implementation grants, that entities must be participating in the planning grant effort. So the goals of the planning grant effort are to tackle climate change pollution while supporting the creation of good jobs and lowering energy costs, accelerate work to address environmental injustice and empower community-driven solutions in overburdened communities or neighborhoods, deliver cleaner air by reducing harmful air pollution in places where people work, play, and go to school. And so the time frame of this is June 2023, or now, to May 2027, and that's just for the planning grant. Switch to the next slide. Oops. So where are we at with this opportunity in the state of Arizona? The state it will be receiving their $3 million, and that effort will be led by the Arizona Governor's Office of Resiliency. So Governor Katie Hobbs has created a new Office of Resiliency, and they will be leading up the climate planning effort for the state. For Pima County, we will receive $1 million, and it will be led by my department, the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality. And we have received letters of support and commitments from the city of Tucson, the town of Marana, and the Tohono Nation. They've all committed to partnering on this effort. And of course, we're open to partnering with every jurisdiction that is interested in partnering on this. Again, it is important for jurisdictions to realize that in order to receive those implementation funds, which will be significant, that you will need to be part of the process, the planning process. So we do intend to have some meetings, develop a working group, a jurisdictional working group that will work collectively on this planning effort. And so please reach out to me if that's something that you're interested in doing. And then Maricopa County will also be receiving $1 million, and that effort will be led by the Maricopa Association of Governments. So the deliverables for this effort fall in line really closely with what Dustin was talking about. They will be requiring a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So it's fantastic that our local greenhouse gas emissions inventory is about to be updated. And we definitely don't have any intentions of reinventing the wheel. The way that this is looking like it's going to work out, based on the most recent discussions we've had with the state, is that the state will be hiring a contractor to do a statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and they will include all of Pima County. So I imagine they will definitely be leaning on Dustin for the work that he's done with the emissions inventory, and then that inventory will be expanded to all of Pima County. Dustin's inventory is just for Eastern Pima County, so it'll be expanded to all of Pima County and in fact all of the state. It will also have what was brought up by Kimberly is projections and future projections, as well as cost benefit analyses for certain implementation measures. So there's going to be a really heavy emphasis on looking at low income and disadvantaged communities as areas that will need that implementation work to be starting right away. So there'll also be an analysis done for how the possible future projections and implementation measures will impact those communities specifically. So we'll have that baseline inventory, the projections, targets, and then a quantified reduction measures by the end of that. So that's great. The Pima County, like I said, won't be leading up that effort, but we'll be working closely with the state and the state contractor on that. Like I said, that benefits analysis and the low income and disadvantaged community benefits analysis. And then the other pieces that PDEQ will be working on is the workforce planning analysis. And we intend to work with our community workforce development department at Pima County to really be looking at what are the workforce needs in order to get the implementation measures accomplished. So if we're going to be reducing our emissions in our region, there is going to need to be significant new work done in our community, things like installing charging stations and solar panels and maintenance and facilities, looking at facilities and energy savings at different facilities. So I think it's going to be really important to be thinking about the workforce piece of that and what it will take to ensure that we have a workforce that's ready to hit the ground running on these efforts once we can hopefully get some of those implementation dollars into the region. And then the other piece that PDEQ will be heavily involved in is the stakeholder engagement. And the city of Tucson did a great job with that piece when they were developing their climate action plan. And so Pima County will definitely be kind of following what they did and expanding to the communities outside of the city of Tucson and looking at the rural areas of the other jurisdictions and making sure we get that stakeholder engagement. And we do intend to work with community-based organizations closely on that effort as well. So that'll be coming very soon. So like I said, we are going to be looking for broad community support and engagement for this planning effort. So please, and we just submitted this application on Wednesday. We have been told that we should anticipate that EPA will ask us to begin this process quickly. It's only been 2 days. We haven't heard confirmation from them on exactly when they want us to start. But it will be this summer at some point, anywhere from June to August is what I've heard. So if this is something that any of you are interested in participating in, please reach out to me right away so that we can make sure we get you on our contact list and you can participate in our stakeholder outreach efforts. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand now. All right. And we will go ahead and move on to the city of Tucson. We're going to have Fatima Luna give us an update. And Fatima, for the past 3 years, has served as the city of Tucson Mayor Regina Romero's Climate and Sustainability Policy Advisor. And her contributions include the development of the city's Climate Emergency Declaration, EV Readiness Roadmap, and the city's Climate Action Plan, Tucson Resilient Together. Go ahead, Fatima.
Thank you, Natalie. Before I begin, I saw Kimberly's hand up. Do you have a question for Natalie, Kimberly?
I did, but I can follow up via email. Thank you for offering, though.
Okay. Oh, and I have control. Thanks so much for the invitation, Fatima Luna. My pronouns are she, and it's really a learning space for mayors and just learning best practices. And there you go. And so in September of 2019, when Mayor Romero was then a council person, I don't know if you'll remember that youth organized strikes, climate strikes throughout the state. And there was one here in Tucson, and basically the youth asked their elected officials, their local leaders to take climate change serious and also to declare climate emergencies. And so Mayor Romero was part of that strike. And it is very interesting that exactly a year after, in September of 2020, she led the creation of the climate emergency declaration that was adopted by Mayor and Council. And that document has actually become the guiding, like the foundation for a lot of the climate work that the city is currently doing. And that declaration called out or committed the city to, among many things, and Carlos pointed out some of those, committed the city to develop a climate action and adaptation plan. And so the language in the declaration became the guiding principles, making sure that there's like bold mitigation strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but that we also consider like resiliency and nature-based solutions. And most of all, that this planning process is like people-centered and community-driven, that is aligned with existing city planning processes to avoid duplication, and so maximize resources and strategies. And so this is a very general timeline of the climate action planning process. I won't touch everything in detail, but I do want to point out a couple things. The first one is that it was just early last year, when the city of Tucson hired the consultant, Burro Hapo, to carry and lead this climate action planning work. And so we now have an adopted plan and an implementation plan. The second thing that I want to point out is that that community engagement piece really began before the consultant was on board. And this was in anticipation of knowing that this a very intentional community-driven process needs time. And so in 2021, the first thing that we did was to have a online community survey that was well responded. Close to 4,000 people responded to the survey, was statistically significant. However, we also learned that there were only 6 responses in Spanish. And so there were some gaps in that process. And so knowing these, the next thing that we did was we partnered with the U of A and their UC3 program. We partnered with the Tucson Climate Change Coalition and Southwest Decision Resources to apply for funding at the U of A and develop and implement a series of listening sessions, mainly focusing on the folks that didn't respond to the survey, but also like the communities that are at the front lines of climate change, either people that are from like communities or groups that serve these communities. And so we had 14 community listening sessions that were really like one-on-one, and we got over like 13,000 unique comments. And so this really highlighted some of the things that we needed to focus on once we had a consultant on board. So once we did last year, we realized that one of the best strategies to get community input is to lean on the people that are already doing this kind of work, that already have strong partnerships, strong leadership within the communities that are at the front lines of climate change. So we partner with Paisanos Unidos, the International Indian Treaty Council, Local First Arizona, the Arizona Youth Climate Coalition, the Southside Workers Center, the San Javier Co-op, and the NWACP. And so with these community partners, they essentially became our underground partners that were leading the workshops where we got most of the where we got a lot of the input. And these workshops were I guess in a 2-phase approach. The first phase was like visioning. We asked questions about like, how do you envision Tucson by 2030? And then what are some of your concerns? And then in the second phase, we took those concerns and we took those visioning and developed a high level, a list of strategies that then they analyze, identify gaps, filling blanks. And so it was a release two-step process that we also did with the community at large. But this was going to the community groups that are typically not part of these dialogues, because either they can't take a Tuesday off in the morning to go to the TCC, or we facilitated this process so that we go to them on the places that they already meet as a group and obtain their feedback and build partnerships over time. And so, okay, so with our community partners, sorry, it went too fast. We implemented a series of community dialogues, and these were very like one-on-one with youth and like frontline communities, where we did that two-phase approach. And we got a good response. Close to 300 people participated. And so it was really interesting to see the different perspectives from different groups and how they express concerns and priorities around climate. But at the end of the day, they were all speaking the same language, was beautiful to see. We also, excuse me, also working with our community partners, we did a series of pop-up events. So showing up at places where people are already congregating, excuse me, like the Swami, like events. We went to large family reunions. And so these were very quick ways to inform people about the climate action plan and get their responses in a very quick but also strategic way. We also did 2 large public workshops, and these were attended by diverse groups. It was the same kind of approach, like the two-phase approach, but in a larger setting. And so this were also provided a lot of really good input that it was all incorporated into the plan. We had an open house for nonprofits and community groups. This was a smaller setting where folks, we had already had all the strategies. Folks identify some gaps, but also more than anything, they ask questions on them. So it was a really good space. We also had a listening session with business leaders. The mayor and Tim Tamier were there. They presented the strategy, answered some questions, and it was also well attended by our business leaders in the region. And so all of these different engagement strategies led us to directly engage with about 5,000 community members, representing over 150 participating groups. And so what you see right here on the right is a, kind of like the process that we went through from, and this is just an example, this happened in all the engagement opportunities that we had. So how like the comments of people became strategies in the plan. And so with all of these ideas, all of these recommendations, at the end of the day, we identify 122 actions with 24 strategies that are mainly in 5 areas: governance and leadership, energy, transportation and land use, community resilience, and resource recovery and management. And so that was the plan. And so in March 7th of this year, Mayor and Council, I forgot also to say that the plan was up on the website for review. Anyone could comment or provide comments that were also analyzed and incorporated or responded to in the plan. And so after like about, I think it was maybe a month that the plan was up, I had to go back and double check. But after that time period, the revised plan came to Mayor and Council for approval. And so it was approved in March 7. And one of the things that the mayor asked staff was to come back with an implementation plan so that we can get started right away. And so only a month after staff brought back an implementation plan that goes through the end of fiscal year 2024, and that implementation plan was approved. And so the implementation plan really moves forward a little bit over 50% of the actions within the plan. So most of them are focused on transportation and land use, with 21 actions for the implementation plan in that, followed by energy and resource recovery and management. And you already hear from Carlos what are some of the plans on that area. And so when the implementation plan was developed, these goals were kept in mind. We knew that we needed to honor the community input. So some of the actions that are moving forward are those that honor the community input, but also that have kind of like the biggest return on investment. So like which ones have the biggest impacts that we can actually significantly move forward through the end of the fiscal year 2024. We also know that we need to continue to work with partners at all levels. We need funding from all levels. And so that's going to require a lot of alignment, a lot of collaboration across the region. Another important thing that was kept in mind when these goals were developed is that we need to measure the impact. And so I'm so happy, Dustin, that we have an updated greenhouse gas inventory, because it's really important to, like, if we don't measure how we're doing in terms of like the actions and the impacts, then we won't have a way to go back and adjust if we need to. And so that also helps us keep each other accountable. And so overall, these implementation plan will require about a little over $80 million, with 20 million of that coming or expected to come from the state in either grants that we already submitted or that we are seeking or pursuing, about 300,000 from the state and then 60 million from local. I do want to emphasize that this implementation plan takes into account some of the efforts that are already ongoing and building onto those. So it's very excited that this is happening at this point in time. And some of the immediate things that are being done is to, and then I guess I'll just move forward to this one, is to create the team that is going to lead the implementation of this plan. And so right now, the city of Tucson is looking for a chief resilience officer to lead this work and make sure that we accomplish all of the goals within the fiscal year of 2024. So feel free to share these information. And that's our next step. We already have an internal team for the climate action team, the CAT team. And so this person that is going to be hired is going to be the lead, making sure that the plan moves forward. Another thing that was approved during the implementation plan were 2 positions. So one is this one, and then the second one is a data analyst, because of the importance of tracking, measuring progress and greenhouse gas reductions. And so with that, I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Fatima. And I'm sorry, maybe I'm not seeing the hand. I did not see your hand, Kimberly. So if I'm not calling on you, just speak up. I don't see any hands at this moment. You all have done a fantastic job, and thank you very much for the update. And I'm looking forward to working more with you on these efforts in the coming months as well.
Natalie, if you don't mind, I'll jump in with a question for Fatima.
Okay, yeah.
Fatima, you mentioned that the greenhouse gas inventory Dustin had will be a useful tool to measure progress or measure the effectiveness of these programs. But what do you have in mind to measure the effectiveness of how the work is going to how effective the work is in making disadvantaged communities more resilient and adapt to climate change?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And so one of the important things about like monitoring and also one of the outcomes that is expected is that we developed some sort of like dashboard with specific metrics and indicators for looking at progress. And so different analysis like can be done to look at, what is the impact of these specific action strategy in terms of either increasing resiliency and frontline communities or being better prepared to adapt. So there's a bunch of metrics and indicators that could be used. And so that's one of the first tasks of that the CAT team is going to look into because you want to have metrics that make sense, but that you can also have access to the data. And so I know that data limitation is, it's something real. And so when looking at what are the monitoring metrics that we're going to use, that needs to take into account, like, does this data exist? Is there a gap? Is there opportunity to collect the data? Like, how can we collect it? I know that, there are, there's people that are already doing some of this work. And so what's working and what's not. The other thing is that because these actions come directly from community input, it's a pretty good representation of what the community is looking to implement. And so, I'm just thinking that the first thing that comes to mind is heat. And so when you look at heat and you look at the impact of that, the strategies around heat have, so there's multiple indicators from like health to the actual infrastructure that is in existence, to the accessibility to the infrastructure, to like surveys of how people are actually feeling about it. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but it is a very exciting time. And so we are looking forward to developing those very critical metrics. So yes, I hope that answers your question. More work to be done.
Did you have another question, Kimberly?
I do.
Go ahead.
So none of the things, and I know, you can't exhaustively discuss all the proposed ideas for work to be done, but it struck me that none of them were along the lines of, with climate change, natural ecosystems that sustain people are getting hit really hard, from riparian areas to, and the list goes on. So I was wondering, and there's also a lot of funding right now from the IRA and the BIL for ecosystem resilience. Is that a source of funding or an approach that you anticipate pursuing too, and just didn't get to discuss, or is it something you're not focusing too much on?
Yes, no, that is very important and actually holds a special place in my heart because I work in conservation restoration along the Colorado River Delta for close to 7 years. So I know the importance of ecosystem restoration, especially like riparian areas. So yes, that is, there are strategies within the plan that focus on specifically like on ecosystem restoration. And there are some strategies that the city currently has, like the Mayor's 2 Million Trees Initiative, but also the Storm to Shade, that support those efforts. But there's definitely a lot more opportunities to do that type of work locally. And I also know that there's nonprofits that do that kind of work. But so yeah, it's not excluded from the planning process, is not excluded from the actions. It is part of the actions. But in through the end of this initial implementation plan, in addition to the 2 million trees, doesn't focus on other ecosystem restoration projects in particular, besides Tucson Million Trees and Storm to Shade. But that doesn't mean that it won't, the next implementation plan, because we wanted to focus on the things that are very feasible and can be implemented meaningfully through the end of fiscal year of 2024. But I hear you, like, you know, humans are part of an ecosystem, and so like that, our impact on the ecosystems, it could be both ways. So we can really help restore them, or if we don't do anything about it, or we continue to pollute them, it could really go the wrong way. And so that is part of the plan. But in this initial implementation plan, it's not a huge focus, just because there's some work that needs to be done when it comes to like heat, when it comes to also doing an energy source study to analyze the potential of community choice aggregation, municipalization, and other things. And so, but that being said, Tucson Million Trees and Storm to Shade support those efforts.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? All right, we appreciate the update, Fatima.
Thank you.
All right, and then our last speaker today is going to be Alex Chavez, who is a planner with the town of Oro Valley. Go ahead, Alex.
Perfect, thank you. I can share my screen if we don't have my presentation there. 1 second. Perfect. And okay, can you all see the presentation screen or the title slide?
No,
Okay.
I can't see it.
Okay, 1 second. Move this over here.
Now we can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks so much for that. Great. So yes, so I'm with the town of Oro Valley. I'm pretty local, so most of my experience is with active transportation planning, and turned a new leaf with land use planning. So we'll give some updates on what we're doing here in the town of Oro Valley. So I'll frame the presentation around some of the elements that go along with resiliency planning. It's a wide spectrum. So we'll kind of focus the lens on what Oro Valley is doing and the applicability of that. And with our general plan, some updates on how we're getting people moving around the community through our bike paths and trails, and then some great updates that we've done for our solar permitting process, and then some of the great work that our stormwater utility team is doing as well. Yeah.
Alex, real quick before you continue, you're sharing with us your presentation mode instead of the presentation. So if you just want to go back to Zoom and go to share again, and then just share the slideshow. And let's see if that works.
Okay. Alrighty.
There you go. That looks great.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. So our biggest guiding document is going to be our general plan. It really shapes our policies, how the town's growing, and it's based on the community's vision for that future. What's unique for Oro Valley is that we do use this. It's pretty unique for a few jurisdictions that this document is really used throughout the lifespan of that of the plan, throughout our everyday practice when we're reviewing development plans or our programming and policies. So it's not just something that sits on the shelf and it's revisited in the next 10 years. And so with our general plan, the elements that we had, it really kind of all goes together with the environment community and again, the development. So while we're looking to build those policies for this upcoming update, which is we're really excited for, that's coming up in October or in the fall. We're doing some of our preliminary work for getting things organized and ready. We had our community engagement plan that was recently adopted by town council. And so we're looking forward to that. And another element that we have is Oro Valley has grown. And so we now have a housing element that's required by the state. So taking advantage that we have a new general plan coming in online, efforts coming online. We have a community that's growing and some opportunities to understand if the priorities and the visions have shifted. From 2016 general plan, the community really outlined that what was important to them or how they envisioned the future of the town is to preserve the scenic beauty and the environmental qualities that that make the Sonoran Desert in our region as beautiful as it does. So those goals and priorities really focused on conservation efforts for the natural resources, green environment, renewable energy, and water resources, among some other of the other elements. So as we go through the update process for our 2026 plan, we will we'll have some workshops and community and engagement opportunities to better understand if those visions, if those items are still within the vision that the community has, or have an opportunity to really dive deeper and build out those nuances for our planning efforts. So I did mention we do have the beauty, and so the uniqueness of Oro Valley is that we have opportunities to provide connectivity to our region's environmental gems. So we have the hiking trails, the bike paths, and it really has an opportunity for the residents and visitors to enjoy the natural resources that we offer. So one of our biggest items that we have, or development updates that we have, is the Vistoso Trails Natural Preserve. This is a 202-acre open space area. It's formerly the Vistoso's golf course, which the town acquired around the summer of last year. So I'm more of a caddy than a golfer, and maybe some others are as well, so they can appreciate that this golf course is now will be used as an open space. The master plan effort that's underway, that's been underway, really involved a lot of community engagement workshops and some understanding of what the needs are for the open space. The plans are to include a walking and biking path, opportunities for passive recreation, reusing some of the facilities that are existing on site. So those golf course bunkers, the driving range, and reimagining how those elements could be reused. And so there was certainly quite a bit of participation from residents, which was really great. And the plan has been going through the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and Town Council. And so I think that's one of our that's a big asset to have, be able to provide that connectivity and opportunity to enjoy the open spaces here in town. And then we also, our Parks and Rec team has started a hiking program, which was really popular. The opportunities to sign up filled up pretty quickly. So that's great. So hopefully we can explore that and expand that moving forward. And to keep things bike related, our town is certainly working in with opportunities to bring in some of the some cycling events or opportunities to collaborate with El Tour de Tucson, the Tucson Bike Classics, and US Cycling. Some great opportunities there. And then there's also been some updates to some improvements to our multi-use paths here. Our town built about a mile of a connectivity for the La Cañada Naranjo Drive multi-use path. And then we also had about a little bit over a half mile improvements for the Naranja Drive multi-use path, which provided access to a connection to the Naranja Park entrance from La Cañada Naranja Drive. So that's exciting to help kind of build a more cohesive bike network system. And then to keep things bright and sunny, the town has also really improved the permitting process for solar installations for residential houses. So our permitting team has worked to incorporate Solar App, which is a platform that will verify code compliance for residential permits to install solar panels. And so now when our applicants previously would take about 10 days to approve, now applicants can get a response within a day. And so to put that in perspective, in last year in 2022, we had 704 permits that were issued. So certainly some time-saving efforts there, and hopefully that provides some encouragement and incentives so more residents can take advantage of that. Additionally, Oro Valley participated in a nationwide competition for to implement this kind of program with Solar App. And so the prize is $15,000. So we're certainly hopeful that we'll receive that and have our fingers crossed. We'll know by the end of June if that's something that, if we were awarded that prize. And then our stormwater team, they have been pretty busy here. They did provide some data collection assistance with the Vistoso master plan efforts, and they did some data collection to understand what are the characteristics of the environment there, the riparian areas and the features that are on site, and to better identify which areas would be more conducive for conservation areas and suitability for that. We also had in addition to supporting the master plan efforts, the utility stormwater team is also responsible for our stormwater management plan, erosion hazard management, and ensuring that we're compliant with the Clean Water Act with and our surface water flow. So the team has been working on making improvements for our roadways, the erosion control, and assessing our floodplains, that's a mouthful, of our areas. And so these efforts not only help the longevity of our infrastructure lifespan, it also helps us create more climate resistant infrastructure when we are extending the life of the systems and the roadways. And so that's kind of Oro Valley's update in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. I have my email there, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Alice? Don't see any hands. Go ahead, Charles. Make sure you unmute. You're still muted. Charles, we can't hear you because you're muted.
I thought I unmuted. Okay, I'll cut it short. Alexander, thank you. That was excellent. I'd like a copy of your PowerPoint if I could get one. I'll send you an email as follow-up, but that was very comprehensive. And I'm doing some volunteer work with Oro Valley with the Visoso Trails Preserve. Come up and see it sometime. We're getting an incredible resurgence of lizard species, all sorts of animals and things. I've seen more lizards in Vistoso Trails I've seen in a lot of the natural areas. So it's worth coming up and checking out how this, human influenced patch of land is rather rapidly moving back into a natural state. So it's just a plug for, visiting our town. That's all.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Stack. Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely take you up on the offer and happy to send the presentation to whomever.
I don't see any other hands, so thank you very much, Alex, for giving us that update.
Yeah,
appreciate it. All right, we're going to go on to agenda item number 7, future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items they'd like to see? Charles?
Yeah, I would like to propose that we explore a tour of the recycling campus. Initially, I just kind of floated the balloon. Perhaps we could make a group tour, but that would be, I would be fascinated, and I suppose I could make a one-on-one tour, but maybe if we as a group went up there, that would be really kind of cool. And I've done group tours with Trace Rios, for example, from University of Arizona. So it's really a good thing to do. And I'd like to emphasize that Tucson is really doing some innovative stuff here. I'm just really very impressed. So I look forward to seeing that Reales campus sometime. So I hope we can work that into our schedules.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay, so before we adjourn, I do just want to mention that today is Lee Comrie's last EPAC meeting after over 30 years with Pima Association of Governments. Lee Comrie is retiring next week, I believe. So I just want to commend you, Lee, for your public service for so many years. I worked with Lee at PAG for about 5 years. That was great. You've done a lot of really great work for Pima Association of Governments over 3 decades. So thank you very much for everything you've done. We can give her a little clap. And I'm going to give it over to Mead. Mead wanted to say a few words as well.
Thanks, Natalie. I just wanted to add to that because this is our public chance to say goodbye to Lee in this venue. Lee, some of you may have known her for many years. I've had the good fortune of working with her for 17 years. When I first met her, she had just become the air quality manager. Then we became sustainability coordinators together as we became more integrated over time. And she's just shown such adaptability to be able to do anything. And you just might not know it. Behind the scenes at EPAC has been Lee working so carefully and so respectfully with each meeting speaker. And so she's really been a model for how to do these types of meetings and coordination regionally. She's always in the know about the regional government happenings, and that all shows in the way these meetings come together. So I just wanted to put a little shout out to her that she's one of those impactful people who are quietly doing the legwork behind the scenes, but you are so essential and so appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Mead.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the kind words and this committee and having your membership and participating as you have. has made it very easy for me. And there's so many good things going on in the region. And I'm glad we have a venue to talk about these things and coordinate. So thank you.
Hopefully you have some fun plans for your retirement coming up. You're still a spring chicken, so you've got plenty of time off now to do your exploring. So that's fantastic. We're very happy for you, Lee. Thank you very much for everything you've done.
Thank you.
And with that, would anyone like to move to adjourn the meeting?
I actually think last time we decided we didn't need to actually have an official action to adjourn.
Okay,
So you
I
can
never
just
keep
call
track of
it.
it. Okay, if you say so. Oh, and I will say that Hannah Oden will be taking over as EPAC lead for future meetings. So if you've got topics or things that you need related to EPAC, please reach out to Hannah Oden for those things. So I will move to adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.